Wait! I'm a what? Written by Artina Blackcharm. Chapter 4. Curiosity and confusion go often hand in hand. Summary. With a new day, there is sure to be something Danny will do or say which will only cause more confusion. When Valer woke up, he knew he wasn't on the street or back in Arkham. After all, it wasn't warm or comfortable in those places. Arkham has the most uncomfortable beds that didn't even big enough for him. Also, the colorful, soft, small blanket covering him wasn't anything like the thin, scratchy rag the asylum gave him. That and the fact that those places didn't have light blue walls and a man leaning against the doorframe in something other than scrubs. Morning. It's a bit past 11. Don't know the exact date though. So that's that. The kid left you one of Miss Junie's sandwiches and water bottles to your side. Aaron sat up, keeping an eye on the man before quickly glancing to the side. There, on the plastic bucket, was a tinfoil wrapped sandwich, and there, a water bottle. He looked back at the man. Kid also told me to remind you about the little deal you made. Where did they go? Aaron asked. At the question, the man seemed to roll his eyes in expiration. Damn if I know. His route makes no sense to me. He'll be back later today, but he said you're free to stay or go. And you won't find us trying to stop you, whatever you choose. Valren grunted in response, and the man nodded. Well, that's about it. When nothing was said by either of them, the man walked away, leaving Valren in an empty room. Valren just sat there for a few moments, trying to gather his thoughts. He could smell the chill coming from the outside, and hear some motion downstairs, though nothing that would say that he should be ready for people coming at him with whatever makeshift weapon they had. The man earlier seemed uneasy, but not necessarily angry, more tired, which made sense. Being homeless during a storm was a struggle, though it seemed they managed to set up a building to avoid the worst of it. Kid also told me to remind you about the little deal you made. The only agreement he had made since getting out of Arkham was with the kid in the raincoat, and he kept his side of it. Sure, keeping to himself was easy, but he hadn't expected this in return, much less for an older man to give in to a decision that a scrawny teen made. Any sensible Gothamite would have run or chased him off by now. Valren grabbed the water bottle, easily drinking the whole thing before opening the second. He grabbed the wrapped sandwich, recognizing the smell of the chicken salad that he surprisingly still hadn't gotten bored of. As he took the first bite, he tried to remember how he ended up in the building. He went over the events of the previous night in his head as he ate. He remembered how he had gone out, looking for somewhere else to stay, except his luck ran out. When he found himself in the middle of a truck-moving operation gone wrong. A truck had been knocked on its side, with their supplies out in the street. Men were taking cover from gunshots. Valren had tried to get by when one of the men who was a fan of small grenades threw one. It ended up right by his suppy. All chaos had broken, and Valren's presence got noticed not long after. At first, he just wanted to leave before one of the bats showed up, but then he decided that maybe he ought to take a chunk out of one of them when they didn't leave him the fuck alone, and started calling him a freak. It was almost like some of the old fights he used to get into when he first showed up in Gotham. His head was distracted from any shift and only focused on the fight. His blood got pumped, and he finally got to let loose. After the months in Arkham, where sometimes things got muddled by the medication, they were practically shoved down his throat. But then he got hit in the face with some sort of gas. It reminded him of scarecrow gas, but different. It had made him feel like his blood had been on fire, and that primal part of him took over, except after that thing got muffled, they only expected to feel the phantom sensation of his claws tearing into flesh, or the taste of blood in his mouth, but none of that came to mind. He was clean, and he couldn't remember any screams cut short. Instead, he remembered something that didn't come too often: comfort. Which didn't make any sense at all. It was odd, but somehow it lingered in the back of his mind, as if trying to make him remember something else that was too far away. A sound drew him out of his thoughts, and he looked to the doorway, finding two pairs of eyes belonging to kids staring at him. One of them squeaked in surprise. They didn't leave. Instead, they retreated out of view, and Valer couldn't understand snippets of their quick muttered conversation when it stopped and they came back into view. Slowly, one of them waved at him, and then waited. Awkwardly, Valer raised a hand in acknowledgement. The slight motion caused a flurry of motion. The kid who waved smiled before turning to the others. Valer heard a hiss. "Hey, he's fine, Brett," and some other excited blabble before hearing the sound of them running off, almost tripping amongst themselves if the laughter and thoughts said anything. Valer looked at the empty doorway and back at the small, cozy blanket that was now covering his legs. "The hell?" he muttered to an empty room. Then he was back at Rotten Street. He could see the signs of the fight from the night before, but there was no sign of anyone, and he nodded to himself. Deciding there was nothing else to really see, he tucked back. When then he turned a corner, a figure appeared on the roofs of the building across the hunt borders of Crime Alley. When then he had come back and passed the park, he noticed he gained 3 shadows. "Does Sandra know you're out?" He smiled when he heard the groans of complaint and watched as Zipper, Eric, and Jimmy came out from their respective spots. "How can you tell?" Jimmy asked as he caught up to walk beside Danny. "Just have a knack for it," Danny responded. "Used to having to be on the lookout. Don't want to get shot." The kids nodded in agreement. "Anyways," Danny continued, "what you doing? It's still a bit iffy outside, and Sandra doesn't seem like the one to let you out of sight until things settle a bit more." Danny continued, "What you doing out? It's still a bit iffy outside. We wanted to see who you brought last night," Zipper said. "Heard that it was actually Croc, and you carried him upstairs." "Croc's not so bad compared to the other rogues," Eric added. "Kind of a loner, and I heard a while back that he was friendly to the homeless folk that used to be set up underground until it flooded. And I always thought he was cool with his scales." Then he nodded in agreement, while looking to see if he saw anything up ahead. "Scales are cool. Actually, I know another big guy, but instead of scales, he had fur. He was fun and pretty good in fights. Helped me out a few times," he said, thinking back to Wolf. "What happened to him?" "Prison. Don't worry. I was able to get him out a few times. The warden was a real stick in the mud, so he didn't really deserve to be in there for so long. Ridiculous sentencing. Even trying to put me in there for an honest mistake." Danny scoffed, remembering the ridiculous rules Walker would come up with. Before the kids could ask anything else, her voice rang out. They turned to see an open window, with a scolding Sandra poking her head out. Hey-ya, little twerps, get back in here. Don't think you will avoid cleaning up the mess in the kitchen you made. Not even Danny can save you." "Damn it, I thought you hit it," Eric muttered to Jimmy, before running back to Sandra's building. Danny turned to look at Zipper, who wasn't in a rush. "And you had nothing to do with that?" Zipper shrugged and slowly began to walk towards Sandra's building. "I have no clue what you're talking about, boss." Zipper was a dirty liar, but Danny just smiled to himself as he walked on. The building where the homeless were set up was down the street and around the corner. It was a 2-story building that had been closed off for a while, boarded up with several chains on all the doors to access it. Whenever anyone managed to break in, things were replaced with more measures to keep everyone out by the next day. Though a couple of weeks ago the owner changed, and the boards and chains disappeared, with nothing keeping them out, and no owner coming to yell at people to keep away. Adrian and Panty had decided to set up shop in there. Danny had helped them clean it up inside before the rainy night, and they were able to stay dry. It was a place for them to stay, though none of them moved in permanently. As Danny got closer to the building, he noticed the stranger he brought the night before, sitting outside on the steps. He also noticed how Tick and Tack were watching them in the alley, up on a fire escape. From the way the stranger held himself, Danny knew they knew the kids were there too. "Want me to send the little shadows away?" Danny asked as he walked up the steps. It was different from the rainy night when those eyes looked at him. "The little skids can stay," the stranger said. His voice was rough or gravelly for better terms. "Not sure they'd leave if you told them." "Probably not," Danny agreed, settling to sit on the other side of the steps from where the stranger sat, pumping his elbow on his thigh. "Tick and Tack kind of do their own thing and tend to be stubborn." "Tick and Tack?" Danny smiled. "Yeah. I'm not exactly sure how the kids come up with these names, but I think I know why Tack is Tack, and I think it's 'cause he always has a bunch of nails on hand. Tick says he throws them at people." The stranger's amusement wasn't the clearest to see, but Danny heard it, though he sensed the surprise at the sound from Tick and Tack in their hiding spots. Danny let himself look around. He noted how several of the other residents were watching, or at least definitely aware of him and the stranger. There was apprehension in the air, a sense of waiting for something to happen. Then he turned back to look at the stranger and found that they were already staring at him. He looked at the scales that were brighter in the daylight, the large frame no longer covered by the darkness of an alley, and the sharp teeth that were probably a pain to clean. "What's your name, stranger?" Danny asked. The two stared at each other before the stranger got up. Such a simple action showcased just how big the stranger was, and the muscle they had to back it up. They could do so much damage, and then he was again reminded of Wolf when he saw the claws the stranger had. They walked down the steps and onto the sidewalk. "You're not from around here," the stranger stated, looking at the different spots around the area where people were standing around. Then he let the side of his face rest in his hand. "Yeah." The stranger turned to look at him. "You're gonna get killed in the city." The statement caused a tinge of bittersweet nostalgia. "That's nothing new," Danny said. "I like it here. Where else would I get good chicken salad sandwiches?" It was silent, but Danny could hear Tick's laughter, and he guessed that so could the stranger too. They looked like they were silently thinking something over. "My name's Killer Croc," they finally offered. Danny nodded in acknowledgement and smiled at Croc. "Danny," he said, offering his own name. It's nice to officially meet you." "You're a Virchit," Croc said after a moment of looking at him. Danny only laughed lightly before getting up. Even standing on the steps, Croc was still taller than him. The residents of the previously unclaimed neighborhood that had seemed to be forgotten watched as Bright Eyes smiled at Killer Croc, a rogue last heard to be in Arkham, that was brought in the dead of the night during a storm unconscious. They had wondered what favor Bright Eye was returning by letting Killer Croc stay, what agreement they had made that smoothed over their worries enough to not put too much effort into keeping away the kids from taking a peek at the criminal upstairs. Bright Eyes had said Croc wouldn't bother them, and he was right. The kids were talking about how Danny once helped in a prison escape and even avoided being put in one. Somehow he knew someone like Croc before coming to Gotham City, which made them more curious about his origin. They looked at how at ease Danny seemed to be in the presence of someone that could easily break him. They noted how Croc made no move to do so. With the storm breaking, the bats and birds were able to come back. All of them were eager to get back to patrolling and cleaning up messes left behind by the storm. A few people had taken the storm as an opportunity for looting and some of petty crimes, with how it would take a while for the cops to get back to routine. Not that there were a lot of cops who were interested in breaking up the trouble. As the night went on, someone's absence was noted. Has anyone actually heard from Hood? Batgirl asked in the comms after stopping and mugging. The lack of response from the others was answer enough. Batgirl sighed. Oracle, can you check up on Hood to make sure he is alive and not bleeding out on our roof again? Despite access to comms, there were too many incidents where different members of the family ended up bleeding out in various locations. The roof happened to be a very popular spot. Moments later, Hood's annoyed voice was heard through the comms. I'm alive and busy. After that, he was silent, and any more attempts to get more information were unsuccessful. Yeah, that's probably all we will get from him, Red Robin said. Well, anything is better than B's non-syllable grunts. The others couldn't help but agree. Hood ignored the racket from the comms to focus on the matter at hand. He was watching from his spot up high, as the man took care of some idiots that decided to try selling drugs to kids again. He could have done it himself, but it was always good to delegate tasks and let his men do some work. It even helped keep them happy. They had been a little wound up from being stuck inside because of the recent storm. Dad and the guys were really angry considering one of the kids got roughed up by one of the assholes. Even Stan was out for blood, which was saying something. After all, it was Stan. Hood only hopped down from his spot when Stan was going to break one of the guy's left arm after just breaking the right one. He motioned for Nikolai to intervene. After Nikolai managed to pry Stan off the man, Hood walked up and looked down at the group of 6 men sitting on the floor. Their faces were screwed up in pain and breathing heavily due to the fight and injuries. The 2 guys that Stan fought were a little bloodier than the others. All right, Hood said, and he crossed his arms, one of his hands seemingly holding a gun, in a lazy sort of grip that caught the man's eyes. Who wants to be the one to tell me what you were thinking? Then they raced. When they remained silent, Hood sighed. Either that or let Stan hear. He motioned to the still scowling Stan that was having his hands cleaned with a cloth by Nikolai. Finish what he started. 2 voices piped up from the group. 3 hours later, Jason and his guys were headed back. Jason rolled his shoulders and let himself slump in the chair as the others put away the new drug and cash they had a hold of from the warehouse they hid. Matteo was icing his neck while Nikolai was fussing over Stan's knuckles. The sight of the large Russian man scolding their men, trying to find the other cold compress was ridiculous. Matteo laughed before tossing over the compression he was using and walked over to Jason. You know, you can take off the helmet. None of us will laugh if you're ugly. You can't be any worse than Otis, Matteo said, sitting on the table. Though he promptly hit the floor after Jason kicked him off the edge of it. Ah, come on, boss, Matteo said amid his laughter. Matthias is a cute mutt. The kids all say so. Promise. I promise to let you be the one to pull Stan off someone when he is angry next time. Underneath his helmet, Jason smiled at the side of Matteo's head, popping up over the table. Shit, Hood, you're joking, right? Jason remained silent. Hood, he gave Nikolai a bloody nose. You know, Dr. Leslie said mine will be crooked if that happens again. No response. Come on, man, don't say that. Go home, Matteo, Jason said calmly. Nuh-uh. Not until you tell me you're joking. I swear I will join someone else if you try to put me in charge of Stan. Matteo got up and leaned in close to the table, and keeping an eye on Stan, who was cleaning and wiping the blood away from Nikolai's face. I thought he was gonna bite one of the guys.